is expected to hear the University of Toronto's request to remove a pro-Palestinian encampment from campus this afternoon. And happening now, we continue to hear from some faculty members at the school who say they support protesters.
Historic moment at Queen's Park. A First Nation MPP speaks in an Indigenous language in the Ontario's legislative chamber for the first time ever.
And we'll be sitting down with Sol Mamakwa coming up this hour. Plus, the race to be Mississauga's next mayor is tightening. According to a new poll, we'll take a look at who's gaining momentum. That is straight ahead.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for being with us. Deputy NDP leader Sol Mamakwa made history at Queen's Park today, becoming the first person to speak an Indigenous language in the legislature. He talked about the significance of that moment.
I'm very grateful, thankful for the opportunity to be able to speak my Anstabamoon in Indigenous Ojibwe language in this legislature. I am speaking for those that couldn't use their language and also those people from Kiwetinook. Not only those from Kiwetinook, but for every Indigenous person on Ontario.
And before his address in the legislature, Mamakwa welcomed his mother to the gallery, who's celebrating her 79th birthday today. You just heard her being serenaded, happy birthday. Members saying happy birthday to her.
Mamakwa received a standing ovation from the packed gallery after his address. About 100 supporters gathered to hear him speak, including his family, friends, and First Nations leaders from across the province. Mamakwa is a member of Kingfisher Lake First Nation and a resident of Sioux Lookout. As we noted at the top of the show, keep it here on CP24. Sol Mamakwa will be joining us on CP24 Live at Noon coming up later this hour. We'll take you live to Queen's Park now. That is where MPPs are speaking to the media following today's historic question period.
Spoke and he said, I'm not allowed to do that upstairs. And truth be told, I got irritated. I said, oh, that's not true. Of course you can speak your language upstairs. And then I was corrected by one of my staff members who was with me and says, no, it's only French and English. So immediately went back, apologized, and then we literally sat down over breakfast and said, all right, how do we make this happen? And then the staff here, the team here at the legislature, this is a pretty big undertaking for them as well, right? To find a translator, to make this happen. And this isn't something that we want to be, we want it to be seamless in the future, right? We want it to be something that he doesn't have to stand and give notice for. We want it to be seamless. So this is very, very, very historic and very proud of what the legislature has done. But more importantly, this is Sol's, Mr. Mamakwa's day. He deserves all the credit for where we are today.
Are you hoping that other legislatures will take note? Has any other legislature, maybe probably not, have they reached out to talk about the process here yet?
I don't know if they've reached out. They haven't reached out to me, but they may have reached out to the Assembly themselves. So the Assembly has done some really, really good work in how they are going to be handling this in the future. And I think it is, quite frankly, an example. You reach out to them. The translator won't always be here in the precinct. The translator will be often in community, in First Nation community. So they have done a lot of work on this, and I certainly hope that now that Ontario has done it, there are lessons to be learned in other legislatures, and we're prepared to help out any way that we can.
The House is scheduled to sit for a couple more weeks in June. Are we going to go right to the end, or are we going to rise early?
Look, it's my intention to go right to the end.
And just back on housing real quick, the joint statement said that you will be directing funding towards new projects. You know, one of the big bones of contention the whole time was your focus on restoring units versus building new. Yes. So is there a change of focus now with this new action plan?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. We'd always wanted to protect the role of the service managers in providing housing. We just think that is a proper way to do it, but we also are prepared to. Having reached out to the service managers, we're prepared to work with our service managers to direct funding to the building of new units. it was always the intention to do that. If you look at the way the funding was done, the early stages of federal funding, it's more backdated funding towards the tail end of the 10-year agreement, and it was always our intention, especially when you had COVID, it was easier to renovate, restore, and rehabilitate than it was to bring new units on. So it really was always the intention to bring the new units on towards the end of the agreement and not at the beginning of the agreement. Service managers are in line with that, and as I said, I'm pleased that we finally were able to get this agreement from the federal government. We can
Can you share any updates on what the new home of the legislature will be?
All right, listening to some MPPs take questions after a historic question period today. We'll tell you more about what happened at Queen's Park throughout the day.
Well, University of Toronto faculty, they're showing their support for pro-Palestinian protesters. This as the administration continues to seek a court injunction for the encampment's removal. And CP24's Courtney Heels joins us live with the very latest. We're hearing from some faculty members this hour. Courtney, what have they been saying?
That's right, Lena Bakari. We're hearing from dozens of faculty members who are here on the campus at the University of Toronto saying that they will stand by and support the students who have set up this encampment at a time when the university is seeking this injunction to remove them from King's College Circle. What we are hearing from a number of faculty members, and quite a few have already spoken in the last 20 minutes or so, saying that if the school tries to move the students, they'll have to go through the faculty first. Also saying that they are not going anywhere despite the administration's what they consider to be threats when it comes to the possibility of consequences. That very well could be somebody losing their job, saying that is simply unacceptable. Obviously, this comes at a time when many are watching the latest involving this encampment with the pro-Palestinian demonstrators here for close to 4 weeks now. The university has said as part of the court proceedings that the encampment is causing irreparable harm, saying they have concerns with some of the damage on campus, also with some of the what they just consider discriminatory speech. So the university will be asking the courts to authorize police action to remove the demonstrators. I'll let you hear from a faculty member who spoke just a few minutes ago.
As an administrator, I have a duty of care to the faculty, staff and students in the School of the Environment, and I take that duty of care very seriously. The idea that a university would call the police on its own students, staff and faculty to remove them from campus is unthinkable, and to threaten staff and faculty with termination is unthinkable. So I and many other chairs and directors have written to the President expressing our outrage at these extreme measures and over the lack of consultation that led up to them.
And listening to that faculty member there, he was expressing frustration. He felt that the university wasn't transparent enough with communication with some of the demonstrators who have been set up here on the campus for, as I say, close to 4 weeks now, saying that there should be better dialogue between the two. Now, the two sides are talking. In fact, we received an update from the University of Toronto administration this morning. They say that they had talks yesterday, and they also are planning to meet tomorrow, but they are standing firm, saying that the encampment has to go, and that's why they are taking this to the courts to seek the injunction. It's very likely that process is going to take a while. It's understanding that the beginning of this hearing is set to take place this afternoon at 2 o'clock, guys. And again, it really just depends on whether the injunction is granted. And if that's the case, then the request would be put forward to the police to clear out the demonstration. But we know from the people who have been here for several weeks, they say that they're not going anywhere, that they say that the school is focused more on creating committees when they say they want a commitment. Over to you.
All right, Courtney Heels live at the U of T, where it has been a really busy morning. Thank you, Courtney. A Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a man wanted in a fatal shooting downtown last week. Police are looking for 24-year-old Adrian Gordon, who is wanted for first-degree murder. They say he should be considered armed, violent, and dangerous and should not be approached. If you see him, call 911. Last Wednesday, 30-year-old Jesse Tubbs of Mississauga was found with a gunshot wound behind a building near Jarvis and Isabella. He was rushed to hospital in critical condition, and he died of his injuries on Sunday. Anybody with information is asked to contact police.
And police have released footage of a suspect vehicle and a shooting outside of an all-girls Jewish school in North York on Saturday. Dashcam video shows a truck passing by a dark SUV stopped out front of the Base Hamushka Elementary School. This is near Dufferin and Finch. Surveillance footage from the school shows the driver putting the vehicle in a reverse before coming to a stop. And police say that 2 suspects got out of the vehicle and opened fire at the school. This was around 4:50 Saturday morning. And police are investigating the possibility that the act was hate motivated.
Two GTA police services are now using facial recognition technology. York Police and Peel Police made the announcements separately yesterday. The forces say the technology will be used as part of their investigations and follow consultations with the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner. Police say sharing a system allows for better collaboration while keeping the cost down. Toronto Police previously used facial recognition software for several months in 2019 before being ordered to stop by then Chief Mark Saunders.
DTC fare inspectors and special constables, they're going to start wearing body cameras. During the current pilot, 20 inspectors and 20 constables are going to wear the cameras daily. The TTC says that the initiative is meant to enhance accountability, transparency, and public trust. The cameras are not meant to be turned on 24/7, but instead they're going to be activated during fare inspections, as well as while investigating incidents such as trespassing. The TTC is also emphasizing the importance of de-escalation and their use of force policy.
The province and the federal government have reached a deal to unlock millions in funding to build new homes.
Yeah, Ottawa had previously frozen Ontario out of the money from the National Housing Strategy because of a failure to show proper planning. The Ford government has presented a revised plan that includes more robust data as well as insights as to which housing projects benefited from provincial investment. The deal means that Ontario gets access to $357 million in federal money.
A ceremony will be held tonight to officially rename Centennial Park Stadium after late former Mayor Rob Ford.
Yeah, Premier Doug Ford, Mayor Olivia Chow, and other officials are going to be on hand at the 2,200-seat stadium in Etobicoke. City Council initially voted down a motion in 2017 to rename the stadium after Ford, but passed a similar motion last year. And tonight's ceremony is scheduled to get underway at 6 o'clock.
Social media trend saying not to wear sunscreen is being rebuffed by doctors.
Yeah, CTV's Tony Grace has more on this story. Okay, Tony, we're heading into summer. What is the main message from the anti-sunscreen movement?
Well, Bakari and Lena, good afternoon. It's a series of posts on social media from some different influencers, and it's really difficult to gauge the reach of this movement, but it's enough to have dermatologists pushing back, calling a lot of it misinformation. So some of these videos that are being shared are sharing claims, for example, that sunscreen is more likely to cause cancer than the sun, raising concerns about the components, the substances that go into creating sunscreen, and suggesting that those will cause cancer. Also claims that it can deprive people of vitamin D. Now, some are even pushing theories on how to make your own sunscreen at home. Two Canadian dermatologists, though, that we interviewed call a lot of this misinformation, especially the link as it pertains to the chance of getting cancer because of spreading sunscreen on yourself. They say that there's really no evidence in any scientific studies that that's true. What they do see every day, though, is evidence of what happens without proper protection against UV rays, especially at their midday peak. And we have a little bit more now from one of those dermatologists who we spoke with, Dr. Lisa Xing. She said, for example, that there's just so much of this out there right now that it's really important that people consider this information very carefully against the years of research and studies that have gone into sunscreens that are on the market, which, by the way, are both mineral and chemical based that are available now. And that's something else that the dermatologists take issue with, is the fact that the word chemicals is being used with the type of connotation that it is in some of these social media shares. They point out, there are chemicals in almost everything. And while it is true that there are some chemicals within sunscreen that may in large doses present concerns, they do point out that, it's really all about the dosage, and that there isn't enough in standard uses of sunscreen every day to pose any concerns. And that's based on their medical work and the scientific studies that they've reviewed. So it's a bit of a proceed with caution story, Lena and Bakari, in an age where there is just so much information out there on a regular basis.
Tony Grace, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll take you live to the U of T, where student protesters are now addressing the media. This is after some faculty members also spoke to reporters. Let's listen in.
As faculty, as staff, as members of this institution, members of the University of Toronto, alongside labor unions and community members from across the city, across the province, across the country, across the world, who are joining this growing movement, who are joining this ongoing fight, who continue to insist that the University of Toronto must disclose and divest. As we've said time and time again, we will not stop, we will not rest. 2 p.m. this afternoon, there's to be a case conference to schedule a hearing on the injunction U of T is seeking. The reason they are seeking this injunction is to protect their reputation. They are seeking a court order in order to give themselves the cover for calling the police on this encampment. Shame. Shame. We will oppose this injunction. We will continue to demand better of this institution, better of the University of Toronto, better of Merrick Gertler. We will continue to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. As students and faculty and staff and members of the U of T community, we will continue to demand divestment. We are here, we will continue to be here, and we will continue to demand divestment. And with that, the faculty and I will take questions.
Yeah, Aaron, just keep
All right, listening to protesters and some faculty members at the U of T this afternoon. This is the school is seeking an injunction to dismantle a pro-Palestinian encampment on campus. It's been there for several weeks now. Some of the faculty members we heard from today say they are not going to go anywhere and saying to the school that if you decide to move on our students, you'll have to go through us first. We just heard from students who say their plans are to stay right where they are. The school, on the other hand, says the encampment is causing irreparable harm to the institution. We'll have more on this developing story throughout the day.
Yeah, we have CP24's Courtney Hills, who's on campus right now.
That's right.
Continuing our coverage. Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, we're going to take a look at the latest poll in the Mississauga mayoral by-election. And the race to beat Mississauga's next mayor is tightening. This is according to a new poll.
For a closer look at the results, we're joined live by David Valentin, principal at Liaison Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us, David. For so many weeks, many have assumed that this was a one-horse race. And according to this latest poll, that might not be the case. Break down the numbers for us if you can.
Well, we've got Carolyn Parrish, who has been the front runner for the entirety of the race, being followed by Deepika Damerla and Alvin Tejo, the other two being city councillors. And of course, Carolyn Parrish was a city councillor, was a member of parliament for Mississauga as well. And all of a sudden, the race is tightening, but we've also seen this big spike in undecided with seniors, which is very odd. Usually you see the undecided rate going down, and it has for pretty much every other cohort. But with seniors, this group of voters that regularly does vote, especially in by-elections, it's actually gone up. So it's quite surprising.
Okay, so David, undecided voters, 16%. What difference is that going to make? Like, let's talk about that deciding factor.
Well, I think what's really interesting, and as I just mentioned, is it's really seniors who are the holdouts at this point. And for a long time, they had made up their mind. Then all of a sudden, we got some movement in the last few weeks. And I think partly, part of that comes from the fact that Carolyn Parrish went and did a debate. It didn't go so well. She decided she wasn't going to do any more debates. And then that's been the big theme of the campaign for the last few weeks. Municipal races, a lot of it comes down sometimes to name recognition. And we know that name recognition can play a really large role in these races. What happens to a candidate when that name recognition is negative? And so we've seen, based on the last poll and looking at this poll, that Ms. Parrish has lost some support. It's opened up the opportunity for Ms. Damerla to gain 4 points, Mr. Tejo to gain 2 points, and all of a sudden they're making this more of a race.
Just a little bit of background for our viewers. Carolyn Parrish attended a debate where she made some comments about refugees, residents in Brampton, and transgender individuals as well. She says those comments were taken out of context. Her critics say that she has a troubling history of making problematic remarks. You think, David, that's made a difference?
I think it has, because this was a very sleepy race, and we had some candidates come into the mix, and then we had some other candidates drop out. But for the last few weeks, the focus has appeared to sort of be this negative remarks and things that have been taken by the other campaigns and amplified. But also following that debate, Ms. Parrish decided not to attend any further debates. And we've seen for the last few weeks the candidates, in some cases, standing at podiums, lecturing an empty podium where her place was supposed to be. So I don't know that this is the theme that she wanted to go with. Now, obviously, she didn't want to lose support. That being said, it's hard to know what would have happened if she had participated in those debates. So maybe it was the right decision for her campaign after all. All that being said, she's up by 5 points. There's not a long time to go. The momentum is not on her side right now, but if she can swing it back, she could still be very successful.
And David, talk about the role of voter turnout.
It was low in the last election. It does appear it might be a little higher this election. There's 500,000 eligible voters in Mississauga, give or take, coming around for this by-election. I don't know how many of them are actually going to get out to vote. We saw some advanced polls took place this past weekend. It was an improvement on the last election, but it wasn't very high, right? So I don't know how many voters are going to actually turn out. All that means is that for the campaigns, if they found their supporters, if they're motivated, and if they can get those people out to vote, they could outperform their voting numbers. And this really comes down to what kind of campaign has Ms. Parrish, Ms. Damerla, and Mr. Tejo built. And if they've built strong campaigns, they might be able to actually win this thing.
All right, David Valentin, always appreciate your numbers and your analysis. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Lena, the results are in. We're talking about CAA's list of the worst roads in the province as voted by the public.
Hamilton's Aberdeen Avenue tops the list for the first time. Reasons given were potholes, poor road maintenance, and traffic congestion. We were just giving you a live shot of some of the roads that made the list from one of our breaking news vehicles. Aberdeen first appeared in the top 10 in 2021 and has been climbing up the ranks. Now, here's what the rest of the top 10 looks like. Eglinton Avenue West here in the city took second, no surprise there, while Hamilton's Barton Street, which is last year's worst road, has moved down to third. There's a repeat offender again. And in Mississauga here, Ontario, made the top 5 if you live in Peel. That may not surprise you. And as far as Toronto goes, Bloor Street West, Finch Avenue West, and Lakeshore East also cracked the top 10.
We do know that some of these long ones with big projects on them, like Eglinton Avenue West, do take a long time to get fixed. But we know municipal officials are watching it. We talk to them. We hear from them about what they want to do, that they want the roads off the list. They don't want that dubious distinction, but they recognize the pain points. And we've also had times where people have said, oh, we weren't aware that it was that big a pain point. And so, you know, we want to make sure that people have a voice, but the voice is also being responded to, and our advocacy kicks in to help constituents feel safe in their communities.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I mean, I could say that probably about many spots in Toronto right now, to be honest, with construction and renovations. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Bloor Street's really bad.
Yeah, as a cyclist, I feel like it's getting better and better. Me from a few months ago was a bit irked by around the ROM, Avenue and Bloor. Though now it's stunning. It's really lovely, and I think a reminder for me that things take time and they're sometimes worse before they're better.
The CAA has been running the campaign for 21 years. This year, the list of candidates included 2,000 roads and 145 municipalities.
Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, a court is expected to hear the University of Toronto's request to remove a pro-Palestinian encampment from campus this afternoon. Stay with us.
A court's expected to hear the University of Toronto's request to remove a pro-Palestinian encampment from campus this afternoon.
Historic moment at Queen's Park. A First Nation MPP speaks in an Indigenous language in Ontario's legislative chamber for the very first time. He'll join us live coming up.
And the race to be Mississauga's next mayor is tightening. This is according to a new poll. We're going to take a look at who's gaining momentum coming up.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Lena Latifax.
And I'm Bakari Savage. University of Toronto faculty, they're showing their support for pro-Palestinian protesters as the administration continues to seek a court injunction for the encampment's removal.
CP24's Courtney Heels joins us live with the very latest. Tell us the latest, Courtney.
Well, Lena Bakari, we just heard from several faculty members here with the University of Toronto saying that they stand behind the many students who are encamped here at the campus here at King's College Circle, also saying that if the school tries to remove the students, they'll have to go through the faculty members. In fact, there was a question saying, essentially, what does that mean? What will faculty do if the school does, in fact, call on the police to try and remove the encampment set up on campus? And they said that they would, in fact, be standing by and try and protect the students here who have been here for about 27 days. This comes at a time when we know the university is going forward to try and get an injunction to ask for assistance from the police to remove the encampment, going on 4 weeks here at the University of Toronto. The school says this encampment is causing irreparable harm. They say they have concerns when it comes to damage on the property, discriminatory speech. But again, what we're hearing from the faculty, they say that they aren't happy with the lack of transparency and the way the students are being treated. And they say they are not going anywhere. They will stand by and support the students. Here's more from a couple of faculty members who talked just a few minutes ago.
Yesterday, the administration went to court to get an injunction to threaten the students with police violence and to threaten staff, librarian, faculties with losing our jobs. It's shameful. And by the way, our faculty association has challenged the whole interpretation of private property as the administration has laid it out, and the administration has no answer.
Faculty present at this press conference are only a fragment of the significant support across the University of Toronto community. This includes 300 university faculty, staff, librarians, and alumni who have pledged their support and asked that the administration immediately meet the students' demands, and nearly 4,600 University of Toronto alumni who signed a petition urging the same.
We also heard a very brief update from one of the student representatives here in King's College Circle saying and acknowledging that, yes, the two sides still talking. That is the pro-Palestinian demonstrators and the University of Toronto administration. We also heard this from the school. They confirmed they talked yesterday and they have plans to talk tomorrow. But we heard from the representative saying they don't feel like they're getting anywhere with these talks, saying that they really want to see commitment. They don't want to see committees. These are committees that the school has put forward as a part of the negotiations that continue. What we heard from the students, they say that they have to have these conversations, and also coming at a time when the school is saying, well, no matter what, people have to leave this property here, and that's why they're taking the next step in requesting the injunction to ask for police to remove the demonstrators. So we understand, guys, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, that's when this is going to be presenting in court. It's hard to say exactly how long it will take before there is a decision on whether that injunction will be granted. Over to you.
Okay, 2 p.m. that hearing. Courtney Heels reporting live. Thank you.
A Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a man wanted in a fatal shooting downtown. It happened last week. So police are looking for 24-year-old Adrian Gordon, who's wanted for first-degree murder. They say that he should be considered armed, violent, and dangerous and should not be approached. If you see him, call 911. So last Wednesday, 30-year-old Jesse Tubbs of Mississauga was found with a gunshot wound behind a building near Jarvis and Isabella. He was rushed to hospital in critical condition, died of his injuries on Sunday. Anyone with information, he has to call police.
Well, police have released footage of a suspect vehicle in a shooting outside an all-girls Jewish school in North York on Saturday. Dashcam video shows a truck passing by a dark SUV stopped out front of the Base Hayamushka Elementary School near Dufferin and Finch. Surveillance footage from the school shows the driver putting the vehicle into reverse before coming to a stop. Police say 2 suspects got out of the vehicle and opened fire at the school around 4:50 Saturday morning. Police are investigating the possibility that the act was hate motivated.
And 2 GTA police services are now using facial recognition technology. York Police and Peel Police, they made the announcement separately yesterday. And the forces say that the technology is going to be used as part of their investigations and follows consultations with the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner. And police say that sharing the system allows for better collaboration while keeping the costs down. Toronto police previously used facial recognition software for several months in 2019 before being ordered to stop by former Chief Mark Saunders.
TTC fare inspectors and special constables are starting to wear body cameras. During the current pilot, 20 inspectors and 20 special constables will wear cameras daily. The TTC says the initiative is meant to enhance accountability, transparency, and public trust. The cameras aren't meant to be turned on 24/7, but instead will be activated during fair inspections, as well as while investigating incidents like trespassing. The TTC is also emphasizing the importance of de-escalation in their use of force policy.
And the province and the federal government, they've reached a deal to unlock millions in funding to build new homes.
Ottawa had previously frozen Ontario out of money from the National Housing Strategy because of a failure to show proper planning. The Ford government has presented a revised plan that provides more robust data and insights as to which housing projects benefited from provincial investment. The deal means Ontario gets access to $357 million in federal money.
The Toronto Region Board of Trade is calling for a coalition of organizations to come together to develop the city's waterfront. The board released a report today that looks at what's needed to build up the 10-kilometer stretch of land in a strategic way. It's recommending a team approach instead of what's described as the current patchwork system. The board's also proposing a series of projects aimed at improving the waterfront's connectivity with the rest of the city. It says investing in the area has the potential to redefine Toronto's economic and cultural landscape. And the board's director of economic research joined CP24 earlier with more on their report.
Part of it is about connectivity. It's about, collaborating to understand that, some of the issues around just the physical scale of the waterfront require stakeholders to talk to one another, to really advocate for, the type of, north to south connectivity, the east to west connectivity that we need to make it more enticing for folks to want to come to the waterfront and more appealing. So that's really around placemaking, right? Having the right assets in place and really doubling down on the clusters of activity to make it an enticing place to go.
And the Board of Trade is calling for all stakeholders to develop a shared vision for the waterfront, especially ahead of large events coming to the cities like the FIFA World Cup.
Well, the results are in, and the CAA has released its list of the worst roads in the province, as voted by you, the public.
Yeah, Hamilton's Aberdeen Avenue tops the list for the first time. Reasons given were potholes, poor road maintenance, and traffic congestion. Aberdeen first appeared in the top 10 in 2021, and it's been climbing in the ranks. Well, here's what the rest of the top 10 looks like. Eglinton Avenue West, right here in the city, it took second, while Hamilton's Barton Street, which is last year's worst road, has moved down to third. And Mississauga, here in Ontario, made the top 5. And as far as Toronto goes, Bloor Street West, Finch Avenue West, and Lakeshore East, they all cracked the top 10.
Even if they had, all of that money all at once, the reality is we live in Canada and construction season is short, and they wouldn't be able to fix all the roads at one time anyway, because then nobody would move anywhere. So, we do have to be mindful that there are schedules and some of these have to be planned out over time. We know, and we often talk to our, elected officials about that state of good repair. And the more timely you do the repairs, the less costly it'll be if you delay them.
Not enough physical separators, a lot of potholes. So, yeah.
A lot of congestion here too?
For biking, not. For driving, yeah, sometimes. Now it's not so bad, but during the day, it usually gets bad.
I'm hoping that the bike lanes will help legitimize that bicycles are also vehicles.
I'm going to say 8 years ago, I used to use Bloor a lot to get to my destination where I worked, and it took me a half an hour. Now it would take double that.
The CAA has been running the campaign for 21 years. This year, the list of candidates included 2,000 roads in 145 municipalities.
Yeah, it's 12:40, 18 degrees. And speaking of roads, let's get a check on traffic with Azalea Hart. Azalea, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bakari and Lena. So there isn't much to report on the roads right now, but we could take a look at the cameras. There was a disabled vehicle here blocking the right shoulder and right lane on the westbound 401 collector ramp at Avenue Road. That actually just cleared. There was also a stall here on the westbound 401 Express just after Leslie. This was affecting traffic for some time, but that cleared as well. On the Gardiner, we are seeing your typical delays. They're showing something different here. We're seeing your typical delays on the Gardiner, both east and westbound. It's going to take about 10 minutes in both directions past the construction. So westbound, York to Dufferin, 10 minutes. Eastbound, Parkside to Strawn, 10 minutes. And the northbound DVP is moving well, but volume is building, approaching Eglinton. 10 minutes to York Mills. That's what's going on the roads right now. Back to you guys.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, today is Menstrual Hygiene Day, and there are growing calls for the permanent funding of menstrual products in schools in the province. Stay with us for that conversation.
And there are calls for the province to expand the free menstrual product initiative in schools and make the funding permanent.
And for more on this initiative, we're joined live by Stephen Mensah, Executive Director of the Toronto Youth Cabinet. Thanks so much for joining us, Stephen. It's good to see you again.
You too. Thank you very much for having me.
So the Youth Cabinet really started pushing for this a couple of years ago in 2021. You were successful, but now the province's temporary program is coming to an end. Walk us through what's been happening.
Yeah, so over the last year, students have been able to benefit from the government's partnership with Shoppers Drug Mart, providing 6 million pads to students per year. However, there's still tremendous gaps and barriers for students to equitably access menstrual products, and that's why today we're calling for the government to expand this initiative, but as well as provide permanent funding to ensure the long-term sustainability of the project.
Yeah, and along those lines, Stephen, there's 2 separate letters to the government. Can you expound upon both of those?
So the first letter we sent today called on the government, like I said, to expand the initiative. We're calling for 3 things: mandatory education on menstrual health and the health and physical education curriculum, to ensure that not only do we address the stigmatization of menstruation, but also we normalize conversations. We're also calling for the government to ensure there's a diversity of products, not just pads. There should be tampons, reusable cups, to ensure that students have that choice and we remove barriers. And we are also calling for this initiative to be expanded in elementary and not just secondary schools, because we know students menstruate as young as 11 years old and sometimes even younger. The second letter was just the one we sent back in 2021, signed by all of the teacher unions, Ontario Human Rights Commission, and many provincial stakeholders supporting us on our calls.
Through your advocacy work, you have put out a statement saying you've learned that pads and tampons in the classroom and schools are not a luxury, but a necessity. Talk to us about what this is going to mean for so many female students all over the province.
I've long said that for far too long we have ignored the issue around menstrual periods, and that, ignoring of that has led to our young people being disadvantaged and facing even more barriers to an equitable education. And so the government expanding this initiative is going to ensure that women and girls are able to menstruate with dignity, that they're going to be able to menstruate in comfort, and that they're going to be able to menstruate safely. And this is of utmost importance.
Have you talked to the education minister about this? Are those talks ongoing?
Every meeting I've had with him, I've brought this up because this is of most importance to myself personally. And he's been receptive. I think the government has taken on steps to address period poverty and promote menstrual equity. However, we're telling them that they need to go further, and these steps we're pushing for are tangible measures that they can take.
And Stephen, I was going to ask you about period poverty. What is that?
So period poverty is, in short, the inability to afford and purchase menstrual products. And according to a Plan International survey last year, 88% of Canadian women said that they found that purchasing pads and tampons were too expensive. And it's also important to know that 1/4 of those surveyed said that they had to choose between putting food on the table, paying rent, or buying a pad or a tampon, which is absolutely unacceptable. And I think another statistic to back up our calls for mandatory education on this is 65% of them said they've not had any type of education or comprehensive education on their menstruation. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that not only is it going to destigmatize the issue, but when we talk about the health risk, PCOS and other issues with menstruation, that even some women and girls and those who menstruate don't even have that knowledge on, this literacy that we're calling for the government to mandate is going to help address those barriers.
Have you gotten a sense of how successful the partnership with Shoppers Drug Mart has been, and what difference it's made in schools in the province?
It's been successful in respects to ensuring that, once again, students who first did not have access to menstrual products now have access. And I think when we talk about the fact that the government also gave funding to have more dispensers in the washrooms, I think those are tangible things so a student doesn't have to go ask a male teacher or principal for the products, but they can just go to the washroom and see it, which is a normalization that we need to see. Wherever you see menstrual products, you should see a toilet paper, soap. That should be the norm in society.
Really not that complicated, right?
It's not that complicated at all.
Okay, Stephen Mensah, Executive Director of the Toronto Youth Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having
Stephen.
me.
Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon.
We're going to be joined by NDP MPP Saul Mamakwa, who made history today. Stick around.
The government years ago prohibited Enstabamon from being spoken. The language was taken from us by the arrival of the settlers in the colonization and residential school. the history that has removed the children from our ways of life. Sometimes even soap was used to wash their mouth for speaking their Ansnimon Ojibwe language.
Some really powerful moments in the legislature this morning. Deputy NDP leader Saul Mamakwa made history at Queen's Park, becoming the first person to speak an Indigenous language in the chamber.
And he joins us live in studio. Thank you very much for taking time to come here and speak with us. I was on the desk when you were speaking. It was right around 10:42 this morning that you began speaking. Take us back to that moment.
You know, when I first started speaking in my language, I thought I was breaking rules of the house. I thought, you know, so many times you get up, try to speak, and so it took me about a minute to kind of feel comfortable to speak in my language, and so it felt, you know, unreal. It felt like I was just, you know, in a phase of where, you know, is this really happening? Because I could see all the members around, like, you know, leadership, youth, elders surrounding me, and so I knew that it was there, and I knew it was an occasion that will forever be in my heart. It warms my heart to be able to see, you know, to be able to speak my language, and you know, I think the tough part was to, you know, when an elder told me that, you know, 2 weeks ago I went up and I started speaking the language, and I was told I was doing this, and when he told me that, you know, Saul, since you left for Queen's Park 6 years ago, you're losing your language slowly. And that's how Queen's Park is, and today we changed that.
You did change that today. You made history today. Decades ago, you were punished in a residential school for speaking the very same language you spoke in the legislature today. I mean, it's so incredible just to wrap your head around that. How important was it for you to do this? Have you been thinking about this for a long time?
You know, I've been thinking about it for the last 2 months, and but even before, you know, like trying to speak my language and fully. And I think what you describe about, you know, like, you know, when you speak your language, they send you out on, you know, outside, you know, 40 below to go, you know, cut wood and even put you in detention, right? So like that, so it doesn't seem that that far away, but it was recently. So yeah, it's crazy when you think about it, and for the Ontario legislature to move forward, that's you know, even though it's just a standing order change, the change is this big.
And you credited your mom with teaching you the language, and you also said this, quote, teach your children to speak their First Nations language and be proud of it. What does that mean?
That means I think we see youth today, young ones coming up today. They're so into the TV and, you know, the iPads, the iPhones, and the devices that are there out there, and then they don't have, like, you know, their languages in place. So, what I mean by that is I think we need to go back to teaching, you know, our languages first, and because language is so important, because you know, language is identity, language is healing, language is reconciliation. You know, language is who we are, is where we come from, and it's so important that I think First Nations across Ontario, not just across Ontario, but across the country, need to go back to their language and their, you know, creator-given language.
You were not alone today. You had Indigenous leaders come out. Your family was there. Your mother was in the gallery, and she is celebrating her 79th birthday. What did it mean to you to have your mother there to see this?
So before we went in, we had a ceremony outside around 8 o'clock and 8:30 around there, and we sang happy birthday to her. And I think they actually sang in the house.
Yes, we saw that.
But everybody didn't know her name, so they just go like Saul's mom or whatever. But yeah, but it was very amazing. And I think that those are the one pieces. It's her birthday. I get to speak my language. And thirdly, you know, the Premier stands up and commits to building the 76-bed long-term care facility in Sulcott. So those three things really mean a lot. And but I think, yeah, that's what language does. That's what reconciliation does. Language is reconciliation. I thought that was so powerful.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. You stole my thunder.
So many moving moments today. Yeah.
Language is reconciliation. Deputy NDP Leader Saul Mamakwa, thank you very much for your time. And your insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
and
having
really
me.
Special happy birthday to your mother.
Yes.
Appreciate this.
All right.
I can't believe you didn't bring her.
Thank you for watching Live at Noon here on CP24.